All right, another long drive. So it is story time. Story time. This time, I'm talking about Noah. Noah and his story, and from the Bible. Now, this is to the best of my recollection, so if I leave anything out, I'm not trying to be biblically accurate. I'm just trying to detail the story from a new perspective while talking and thinking and driving and, trying to recall everything that I've known and studied and studied over the years, and try and make a cohesive, interesting story and give a new perspective to potentially what people already know or don't know yet. So, the book of Noah, the story of Noah. It's not a book. Maybe there's a book. But, okay, so Noah was born in a time, I know this is going to sound weird, but if you look at Genesis 6, it talks that angels came down to earth and they bred with women, which bore them giants, right? And this is also corroborated in the book of Enoch, which also elaborates on that story, because Genesis 6 is just a kind of quick snapshot of like a bigger story than, what it details there. Genesis 6 is like a snapshot, just tells you the intro, like, hey, here's a story. Like, giants have been, are now created on the earth. It doesn't go beyond that. It doesn't explain itself. It doesn't elaborate on it. It just says that. Now, we see through the Orthodox Bible that there are many times and occasions where giants come into play, right? David and Goliath, like, that's one of the most famous stories of giants. But it's not the only story. There's a whole nations that were descendants of the giants, the Anakim, right? And they had several, offshoots from them that were nations of giants historically and, biblically. So that's why when they went into the land and they walked around and they said, when they were inspecting it before they crossed over, they said, there's giants in the land, and to them we look like grasshoppers, crickets. Like, they're so small that in comparison they think to themselves, wow, if they saw me, like, I'm nothing. Right? So giants are in the Bible throughout, but their story and elaborations are not explained at all. So in the book of Enoch and the book of Jasher, there's a little bit of expansion on that. I'm going to specifically talk about the book of Enoch, because Jasher, that one I could take or leave, just because historically there's some controversy with it, and I don't know how, historically, if it's accurate, if it's real. But the book of Enoch, in any regard, has more historicity to it, and a lot more people, agree with it than the book of Joshua. And again, take it or leave it. You don't have to listen to the story, and it kind of doesn't play much into it, other than some key facts and interesting tidbits that come from the book of Enoch. But Noah was born in the time when angels came down to men, and they started breeding with women. They weren't supposed to, because they're immortal, right? They can't be killed, and they don't have a lifespan. So their reward is heaven, life, right? But they do not have children. Men have children because they are not permanent. They are temporary beings who are sharing this earth together for a short period of time, and then they will move on, to the next portion of, life, spiritual life, like beyond the physical body, right? So we are gifted with children to carry on, our generations. But angels came down, they rebelled from God, they decided they wanted, it says they looked upon the women, they looked comely, so they came down to them, they bred with them, they bore to themselves giants. So these giants are roaming the earth. When the angels came down too, they are the gods of the temples that you see around the world, right? Like all these different temples, ornately designed, beautiful, right? Megalithic structures from ancient times. Like we sit around and go, wow, why were these made? Wow, it was a tomb. Wow, it was this and that. Like, we don't even have a beginning of the comprehension of what they understand, because when those angels came down to earth, they brought with them, it says in the book of Noah, and this is where it gets interesting, it says that they brought and taught them ancient like things, like secrets of heaven, right? So the stars in their courses, the trees and herbology, that's where it comes from. A lot of people, sack it up to the story of Indians were roaming across the plains, and and they looked at certain mushrooms, and they ate that one, and one killed you but the other didn't. Or you ate the bark of this tree and it gave you energy, and this other one killed you. Right? So it wasn't just a lot of testing. It was like angels came down and say, hey, look, this is how it works. This is how herbology works. But not only that, astrology. They gave astrology, also metalworking, also the makeup and beautifying of the body, and armor and weapons, and construction, and so they gave out all of these designs to men. And because of this, because of their great knowledge, right, they're leading nations. They're spreading out over the earth because every angel wants to be worshipped and followed by somebody. Well, if we're all in one town, then only one of us is greater than the other. And who's the greatest? So why wouldn't you want to spread out and have your own town and village and temple and country and nation worshiping you? And I believe that's why you have Hindu temples, Indian temples, Aztecs, Mayans, right? Easter Island, hedge, the pyramids, every single one of these nations, they were serving a certain angel, and they had a certain appearance to them, so that they would be, carved on these buildings permanently in time. They wanted to be, marked in time, not just a temporary, blip on the earth. They understood that times will change, nations will crumble, dust will blow away once held kingdoms, and we see that in our life, right? Pompeii wiped off the earth, Atlantis gone. So these angels spread out over the earth, and they built temples and had temples built to them. They had nations following them. They did whatever they wanted, started sacrificing, right? There was bloodshed. And these giants are monsters too. Like, how do you feed a giant, and to the proportions that they're proposed to be, biblically, like, they were, by all means giants, but you got to feed that. There's an appetite to that, a liger eats a lot more food than a tiger, a lot more food. So, sorry, I'm messing with the GPS, seeing if I can go faster than I'm currently going right now. Let's see. And no, I'm maxed out. Okay. I keep looking for the sign to tell me I can go faster. It's a long trip. Okay, so the angels are spread out over the earth. So you got to feed the giants. Ligers eat a lot more than tigers. Look up that short documentary. They'll explain how the liger came to be, how there's basically genes within them that are triggered or activated or not activated because of their genetic makeup, right? There's a gene within one of them that says when to stop growing, and because it's a liger, that gene is gone, it's taken out. So there's no limit to its growing. It's just continually growing and eating, and it eats massive amounts of food. Well, we can imagine something like that when the angels come and, do that. There is no limit. Angels in the Bible are described to be, ginormous, and people's experiences with running into angels is that they are massive, they're big, they're very intimidating. So, it makes sense that their children would be giants. But these giants are basically a deformity. They're not supposed to exist on this earth. They weren't spirits born in heaven and sent down to earth. They were spirits that weren't supposed to exist, and so they were created here on earth. So they're not built the same, they don't act the same. We don't know what their demeanor or actions were like, whether they had a conscience or not, whether they're aggressive or brutal. I mean, we don't know what kind of mental capacity a being born not from heaven but from earth, we don't know what that difference makes to a soul. Do they have a soul? Maybe not. Maybe they're just brutal flesh and bone, and the desires that are in that, the brutal desires that are within a man. And if you took away a man's ability, because a man is hindered from taking action on his things because there's consequences. Well, imagine you're the biggest, baddest person by a long shot, right? You're 10, 12 feet tall, and some 5'9", 5'11", 6 foot, I mean, it's even a 7 foot person. One of the tallest people that we could see in our day and age, right? Is some tall basketball player. That person is still nothing compared to this other person. He's double his size. 14 feet tall, easy, these giants. So, imagine that, but now you're also unhindered. Nobody can stop you. There's no guns or cannons. There's, bows and slingshots and arrows and there's not much you can do against that. From our estimations. Maybe they had something different. But right? But a giant, you just can't take that out, because you wanted to, Imagine the brutality that can come from a being that cannot be stopped. So anyway, they're terrorizing the land, and they're eating whoever they, or whatever they want to, right? But who knows where how their desires for consumption stop, That's why I watched Attack on Titan, and I'm not recommending it for anyone who hasn't seen it, because that show is brutal, very brutal, and kind of depressing. But I wouldn't recommend it to anyone who hasn't seen it. But I saw it because it was recommended to me, and but I imagine it's kind of like that. Who knows where their lust for food ends? Because we choose cows and other creatures because they're easy to manage, they're convenient. We have compassion. We do as humans. It's like I shouldn't eat another person because that's a person. Like a person like me, I wouldn't want to die and be eaten. That's brutal. But there's some cultures that do that. So why wouldn't a giant? Meat is meat. If you're driven by your brutal nature, the lusts of the flesh, the hunger, and the sexual desire within man. Now, yet again, unhinder that. Who knows what brutalities can happen with that? So who knows? Maybe they're eating men too, just like Attack on Titan is my point. It could be. So these giants are running around, and and not only that, but the angels are trying to have their fingers in everything and on everyone. They love the power and the authority, so they're kind of spreading their seed as much as possible over the earth. Because when it talks about Noah, it says he was righteous man in his generation. But that word righteous, from the best of my knowledge, it is referencing a genetic purity, like a purity, a cleanness. Look this up yourself. You don't have to believe me, right? But a genetic purity. And so, in other words, Noah wasn't just a good guy, but he was genetically pure in his generation. He was one of the last pure bloodline of his generation. That's how much things have changed in ways that we can't fully comprehend. Yet again, the book of Jasher and Enoch elaborate on this. They say there is a mixing of blood. So a lot of people believe that were chimeras back then. I even saw one time when I was a kid, and I thought this was very interesting. And when I heard about all these stories, it just got more interesting. But we've all seen chimera stuff, in movies and books and stuff, and right? So, but on a Batman episode, a long time ago, right? They started messing with genetics, and they took animal attributes. And yeah, again, we've all seen this in one way or another, but they took all these animal attributes and combined it into this one, shot, and the guy took it and he gained all these abilities because of the mixing of the, genetic blood, and now he gets the best strengths of those things, right? So, potentially, that again, they have heavenly knowledge, comprehension of things that we couldn't possibly understand. They were around, they cheered on God when he created the earth. So they know things that we could not possibly know. They're smarter in a million different ways that we don't understand, right? So who knows what they're capable of or had understanding to do. So who knows how they were, manipulating or altering the DNA of the generations, or muddying the bloodlines of all these people to get them all to be condemned with them. So Noah is born into that. There's genetic impurity. People are twisted by the infection of whatever genetic mutations they're pushing out to the generations. There's brutality like people can't even imagine, because these giants, they're growing bigger and bigger all the time, and there's more and more of them, and there's really big ones, and they'll terrorize towns, and there's really small ones that are still trouble, like young puppies. These, like, there's a youth and an aggression that comes with youth, just blind aggression of like, can I chew this, destroy that? You mess with a puppy long enough, you realize, like, dang, like, youth is dumb. You don't know hindrances and slow down and boundaries, so who knows what kind of like aggression can come from younger giants. So Noah's born in this generation. He's one of the last of the pure-blooded people, right? There's not many left, and they're going fast. Who knows how they were enforcing these genetic mutations, that it was such a large amount of the generation that was infected, They must have been pushing some sort of injection or alteration on the people for 99.99999% of the people to be genetically impure, right? That just doesn't happen by accident. You have to seek out people. You have to, because there's always 5 people in the country who say, I'm not taking that shot, I'm not doing that, right? Some people you'd never run into, but somehow even those people are infected, right? So they did something. They had some sort of ability or power to seek, to find these people and get even the holdouts that say they're not going to do it. So, Noah's generation, Noah's family is one of the last holdouts. So, he had to find a wife real quick to be, who's another holdout, so that hopefully, he can keep that bloodline still yet pure. So he's born into this world. He finds a wife. At some point, everybody's just kind of like, this world is crazy. And God comes down, right? And messages him, however he delivers that message to Noah. Whether, yet again, I'm not remembering right now. I don't remember how, he gives this message. I think he verbalizes it. I think he talks to him. Or maybe there's an angel that delivers the message. But either way, you can look it up, or so, this message is given to him, build the ark, right? So he goes, to building the ark. And he had a long time to build the ark. He was already, I think it's like 300 years old. And in that time, I mean, if you get to 60, you can have a lot of knowledge, but specialized knowledge, right? So if you get to 60, maybe you got into boat building as a hobby and it was fun. Or maybe it was necessary because there are streams nearby, and so it's like just an art that you had to perfect back in the day, because they didn't have cars. The fastest means of transportation, also the one of the most convenient, is a boat back then. A boat was a massive change. You could load it up and take a lot of things, with the right amount of effort. So it might be a skill that everyone kind of had a basic knowledge or understanding of, and now you'd have God come in and, we don't have elaborations of every moment that God showed up or, taught him what to do, told him what to do, or maybe he just, had a lot of wisdom. Yet again, you could be very wise by 90, but unfortunately your life's over. But now you're 300, and, because he was around there, yet again, my numbers might be off, but he was older, and so you can attain a lot of information, and he had a lot of time to put that boat together. Yet again, we don't have full picture of every message that God said. Maybe he gave him clues and hints on how to build a boat. Maybe he walked him through it. Maybe an angel was there for the journey, to give him instructions. Maybe he had a lot of dreams, like every night he went to sleep and he had another dream of how to build, the next portion of the ship. I mean, God talks like that too. So maybe he just got, the stern. I don't even know what a stern is on a boat, but I know that's a boat nautical term, right? So maybe he's built the stern, because he's done that at least before, but he goes to sleep that night and God shows him how to build the bow. Yet again, don't know what that word is. I think those are two opposite ends of the boat. But maybe God showed him that night how to build the front, right? And so over the next month, every night has a dream of how to build the front. And then maybe, the next 5 months it's how to build the middle section, and how to fill it, and how to, what to do with it all. And Kent Hovind, I'll give him credit for this. He's one of the most brilliant creationists that I've ever listened to. Has dramatically changed my faith and my path by the things that he's talked about. But Kent Hovind talked about, he said, when you go to fill a boat, you don't take full-grown adults. You don't take the biggest elephant, several tons onto the ship. And they weren't on the ship very long. It wasn't like 40 years where these animals are going to get big. You take a baby version of every single one of those. And, that's hard to do, and go and collect those things. We don't understand how the world was back then and how God uses anything, anytime he wants to, right? So if he has animals from all over the world, and yet again, the world's not separated by blood, or not by blood, by oceans. Everything's still connected, right? The firmament has not released the showers from heaven. The foundations of the earth have not been broke open. So everything's still connected. So kangaroos and llamas and alpaca, everything from everywhere. We don't know how diversely those things were spread out. And it's God. Those are his creation. They're another pawn on the board. He just tells them, gives them a notion to show up at a certain place, have a baby, and walk away. Because God is the programmer of everything. So why wouldn't he be able to do that to every animal on the earth, Just basically says, show up to his location, give birth, give your baby over, and walk away. So all these babies get on the board, on ship. And another thing Kent Hovind talks about is that, because people say, well, what about the lions, tigers, and bears? Oh my, right? Well, a lot of those are omnivorous, if they need to be. But on top of that, they've proven that in captivity, they fed a lion like non-meat, like vegetables and stuff, and it wasn't as great as a regular lion. But it survived. It's a doable thing. Maybe not all lifelong, but it's definitely been doable. And I was surprised when I heard about that. And yet again, I think that was from Kent Hovind, who showed that they're, it's kind of like a cat. Like a cat will eat birds and mice, but it'll also eat the little kibble that we put it in front of it, So it's not out of the question. It's doable. It's an alteration of the diet. Maybe it's not their preferred meal, but they can survive off it, apparently. So you put all these babies on the ship. You're not on there for many years where they're going to be, big overnight. Because a baby elephant is a lot smaller than a full-grown, multi-ton male, or female adult, right? So in other words, to kind of wrap this section up, all these babies show up, get on the boat, take their sections. It's easy to manage them because it's not a long period of time. Noah gets on the boat, right? His family, apparently one day they finish everything. He has several sons. He makes sure that they have daughters to repopulate with, because God's telling him, man, it's getting close. The end is near, man. That, the bad thing that I've been warning you about is coming. And it does say throughout Scripture that Noah tried to warn people, apparently. I forget where it's at. I think it's in the New Testament, but it might have been in the prophets. But they talk about how Noah warned the generation, right? And they didn't listen. In my head, it's kind of like he just built the boat and got on. But apparently, according to Scripture, it's Noah was building the boat, and somewhere along the way, he was warning people and telling people. And, they've never seen. That was a catastrophic event that no one had ever seen in their lifetime, so nobody could have guessed that it was coming. And maybe it's never rained up till that point. Because it talks about the dew of the earth would rise up every day and water the fields, and maybe that was like how it was done. maybe they never had rain up to that point, but they definitely didn't have the oceans break up like they're about to, right? So Fleckos is warning. Fleckos. A podcast popped up and I read that. Okay, so Noah's warning the generations. He's warning the people, like, something's coming, man. Like, I've got a boat. You want to get on? And people are disregarding it, dismissing it. People don't care. So, he does his best, but he can't twist people's arm and catch them in a sack and drag them onto the boat. And a lot of people, they wouldn't be in agreement with him, so, it's just, that's not how it goes. He offered and warned people, and apparently people didn't care. So, he gets on the boat, and so what happens is both the sky and the earth start producing water. They start producing water because it says the earth was formed on the waters. So in other words, there was a layer of water under the earth, right? And so, yet again, maybe all the oceans maybe they were not that big, or they were just lakes. They weren't huge proportions, or maybe there weren't oceans at all, and there was just rivers and streams, right? But apparently at this point, the heavens open up. It starts pouring rain down. And that's one thing. So people can look up and they go, okay, that's a lot of rain. That's rain, wow. This new thing is happening, and maybe it's pouring down for days, and they're like, wow, this is kind of like, it's new, it's interesting, it's not as terrifying as Noah made it sound. It's kind of just raining, and the roads are made of dirt, typically clay, so they're getting pretty muddy. It's hard to move things, transport things. It's getting inconvenient. I go outside the house and I slip every once in a while, fall on my butt, and my animals don't like it because they like sun, and my garden's kind of wilting because that's a lot of rain. So there's inconveniences, but it's not bad. But it's when the ocean, or when the depths of the ocean break forth. Because yet again, attributing this to Ken Hovind, he elaborates on his story, the Hovind theory, in which the crust of the earth, there's water underneath it, but the pressure of all that earth on top of water, right? It's like a soda bottle shaken up. Like there's all this energy ready to be poured out, to explode out. And God allows it to happen. He shakes the earth, it quakes. And the weak spots of the crust shift, and all that pressure underneath comes exploding forth. And they say it's with such power that it shot into the atmosphere so high up that it just shot like into the high atmosphere where everything freezes instantly, right? Which caused the snow both to go to the north and south poles where they're magnetically charged, because there's a magnetic charge in snow or ice, I believe, which is why we see the aurora borealis, in those parts of the world, because it's magnetic fields, right? So most magnetic fields, the north and south pole, the snow is drawn to these locations. All the water from the ocean shoots up into the atmosphere, falls on these locations, and they've even found, they've found trees standing up. They've drilled through them in the, I believe it's the north or south pole. I think it's south pole, where they've drilled through trees, like 200-foot tall trees, into through 2,000 feet of permafrost into 200-foot trees and back into the ground. They found mammoths dead standing up with food in their mouth, still in their digestive tract. How does that happen? How is their blood crystallized? It has to be apparently negative 300 degrees, and most creatures don't live in negative 300. That's temporary living. It's not like mammoths did that, right? That was not there. Maybe it was cold. Maybe it was a different type of temperature, because they've also discovered palm style trees down there. So it might not be the environment that we thought it was, and mammoths might not even be primarily cold creatures. Anyway, so the water shoots into the atmosphere, it rains down on the earth, And I'm gonna have to take, no, I think that's the gas station that was not open. It was open. I should have gotten off. I gotta pee bad. Okay, so the snow, the water's going into the atmosphere. It's snowing down on top of the earth, massive amounts. I mean, we're not talking about a little bit. We're talking about oceans of water are now gushing from the center of the earth. Not only that, when the earth fractures and ruptures, it sends tsunamis. If, yet again, if there's oceans, and if they were at the bottom of it, kind of like we see the volcanic circle at the bottom of the ocean, if there are, so that there's tsunamis of water rushing over the face of the earth, wiping out land. It's shooting up into the atmosphere, creating like, sub-zero, like snow, just falling down on the face of the earth in places that you wouldn't imagine. The destructive force of all that, because of the magma, the rocks in the atmosphere, the clouds, the smoke, the darkness that, plus the sky's raining, so it's like everything's just dark. And when those things happen, it's like, especially magma, right? We've all seen the videos where volcanoes erupting and there's like lightning shooting off everywhere, right? And so it's like, man, it's like the rebirth of the earth as they're on this boat and it's sloshing around. And land's disappearing faster and faster. And people are climbing up on, whatever they can, high hills, mountains, bridges, towers, castles, palaces, whatever high places they can get to try and survive. Like the water that just keeps rising and rising. Some places are just wiped out immediately. Some places it's like overnight the town is gone, and people just, there's no saving that. There's no, how do you escape that? You don't. So they're caught up in the whirlwind of the water that's pushing inland more and more. There's nothing to grab onto. It's just moving. So the people that can survive the longest, they just happen to be in a lucky spot, the right location. So the water's rising and rising. There's also these giants too. They got to be killed off, right? Like these massive giants running around, like, you kind of need a lot of water to, you don't need a lot of water to drown a 6-foot man. Like waves are easily bigger than that, It doesn't take a lot of water to sweep a 6-foot man off of the standing ground. Just look at all the tsunamis that we've seen over the years. But a giant, a 30-foot giant, 15-foot giant, that takes more. It takes a lot more, right? So the water's rising. People are clinging to the giants. People are, running for the hills. People are, afraid. People are trying to survive. And who knows how long it took for all that to happen. Maybe it was overnight that, every portion of land was covered in water. Or maybe it took like months for, all of it. I mean, they were on the boat for a while, right? But even at the point where you cover all of land, there's still survivors. There's still, things that are lingering. Maybe there's smaller boats, for the people. But, those had, they were caught up in the storm, the waves, like the destruction, the sloshing, Like Noah's Ark is massive. It can handle all these things. But, oh, my nose is itching. Noah's Ark could handle all that. But maybe the smaller boats, fishing vessels, river vessels, it's not built for any waves like that. So those get overturned in time, So maybe, they spent a month on that and they happen to have a sack of apples, and they're just trying to survive, the brutality of this. My nose is still itching. So, there's people that are lingering. There's giants that are potentially lingering, standing on the highest hill, or I don't know why he sped up. Oh, it's a she, okay. looked like an old man. It was an old lady. All right. So the hills, the giants are on the hills. The water needs to keep rising. Maybe they can swim for a little bit. Maybe they're hopping from hill to hill. I don't know. But eventually, everything starts dying off. It's kind of like the Titanic going down. When in the beginning, there's everybody screaming and yelling and floating around. But then after some time, there's less screaming, less yelling, less surviving. It's just less and less and less, and the world's become quieter and quieter, and less, people, less people hanging on, clinging on, less people surviving. I passed that person. She's angry. Why is she angry? I'm doing the speed limit. So there's less people, less giants, there's some floating, debris that people are hanging on to, but they're running out of food and water and resources, and it's just the brutality of it slowly setting in over the face of the earth is, yet again, 99.99999% of the population is killed off. We can't imagine the magnitude of that, but imagine you and your 3 kids and your wife and your 3 daughters-in-law. Small handful of people, right? Imagine the whole world, except for that, is wiped out overnight. No time for repentance. No time for all the things that we want to say goodbye to, right? Like a meteor hits, and we all know it and predict it, and and we have time to say goodbye to our families because this asteroid's going to collide with the Earth, and everybody gets to and we've got 20 years or 5 years or 2 months or 2 days, call up your family, say goodbye. No, it's not like that. It's like everybody was out doing whatever they wanted to be doing, partying, hanging out, going to work, living life, just going about their every day. There's no signs of this happening. Potentially, yet again, we don't know what it looked like. It's just, well, I guess I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to go to the bar. I'm going to go to that marriage. I'm going to go to that reunion. I'm going to go to work another day. I need to earn another dollar. And then suddenly everything, just water starts rising. Worlds change suddenly, instantly. Earthquakes, you wouldn't believe. The atmosphere changes like you wouldn't believe. You're caught off guard. You weren't ready to survive that because no one ever expected that this thing could happen or would happen. But it did, suddenly. So, nobody's prepared for that. Nobody has storehouses of sacks of apples, Maybe there's a farmer who was by a river and he had some of that, but he didn't last him long because he wasn't prepared. So in other words, everything, everyone, and everything that shouldn't exist is now wiped off the face of the earth. And from that point forward, it's like you started over. And that's what they did. They rode out the boat for a period of time. And once everything calmed down, the waters retreated. Wherever the boat, God potentially pushed it around, with the breeze or the wind. He wanted it to be somewhere, right? So he put it in the right spot he wanted it to be so that the earth could repopulate. The animals could eat and survive. And so that's what happens. They land, the doors open, the animals, maybe they hung around for a bit, maybe, because yet again, they're just raised, hand-fed, hand-raised by them. Who knows what kind of spirit God put on them to be obedient to man. So the animals are just potentially hanging out, growing bigger and maturing and having, babies in this area. And, as they develop more and more, produce more and more, they spread out more and more until eventually they're not that many around man anymore. There wasn't enough room for all of them to be in one area, potentially. So they spread out on their own. Or maybe God just dismissed them. We don't know. But either way, it's easy to survive, off plants, fruits, and vegetables. And, if God told you to do this, then you've got those stored up. And, you've got some fruit, not freeze-dried, but dried, and, whatever way you need to survive the trip. And that's the story of Noah. He does, he does have future generations. He does eventually die. There's one more small blip in, which he drank some wine, and he got drunk, and he passed out drunk in his tent. And that was something someone else was describing, is that the tent, because of the alterations of the atmosphere and your blood alcohol level, right? The atmosphere, because it's altered, it's different because of the rain that was once in the atmosphere, an ice shield basically surrounding the earth. Potentially that's what it was. I don't think there was clouds all the time. I think it was the higher atmosphere where, for some reason it released, its temperature. But if you freeze ice, apparently, it's a shield for certain types of radiation, especially if it's really thick, which it was potentially really thick. We don't know what the original atmosphere looked like, but maybe it was just a giant ball of ice surrounding the earth and shielding us from radiation and deflecting, different things. And it would have changed the barometrics of the atmosphere, the pressures on certain gases. In other words, when he made this wine, in the past, maybe he could drink that amount, and it didn't have any effects on him, because yet again, the atmospheric pressures, the amount of oxygen in your blood, all these things play a part to how drunk you get. Maybe in the past, that was a normal amount to drink, but suddenly with all these changes, it's it's not the same, and so he accidentally gets that drunk. That was one explanation for it, and I thought that's pretty reasonable. That's pretty smart. I never even, thought about that. Anyway, that is my 42-minute long, give or take, story of Noah and his family and generations. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to think of the next story that I want to be presenting, and maybe someone give me an idea, and I'll try and put it together in my head, because I don't like to just read the story. I like to think about it and see how much I can comprehend it, put it together, put all the pieces in a cohesive and explainable way, not just from the biblical perspective, because yet again, a lot of that snapshot. Sometimes we got to fill in the in-between and take a guess, but it also helps us understand the stories more. Just like the show The Chosen, we don't know if it's exactly like that, but we can guess that it was something like that. Anyway, love y'all. I will see you again.